Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. I am so happy to be back with another tutorial for you guys, but first I wanted to update you all on what's new and the reason for the small break. So my husband and I will be expecting our second bundle of joy this year in September. So with that being said, the first 3 months of pregnancy for me was a little hard with all the nausea, so I decided to take a small break until I felt well enough to get back to making tutorial for you all. You can probably already tell the gender of the baby by the outfit, so if you want to know how I made this 2-piece jogger sweater set, please stay tuned. Alright guys, let's get started. I have 1 yard of this striped navy blue medium weight stretch knit fabric. I'll be using this 3 to 6 month infant sweater and these 3 to 6 month infant stretch jean skinnies to trace for the pattern. Starting with the sweater, I fold it in half to the back and trace around the body. Then I use my seam ripper to poke through to indicate the seam of the armhole and the back neckline. Then I fold the sweater in half to the front and again trace around the body and poke through with my seam ripper to indicate the armhole and the front neckline. Here are the front and back patterns after being traced and cut with a 1/2 inch seam allowance added. For the sleeves, I place one side down and trace the side. I poke through to indicate the armhole seam and the seam at the top of the sleeve, which also happens to be the continuation of the back neckline, with my seam ripper. Then I take the sleeve and flip it over to the other side, lining the long side of the sleeve along the line I previously traced for the other side of the sleeve. I trace the other side of the sleeve, and just like the other side, I'll poke through to indicate the seam at the top of the sleeve and continuation of the front neckline and the armhole seam with my seam ripper. I add my 1/2 inch seam allowance around the tracing and the sleeve pattern is complete. For the pant, I take and fold in half to the front. When tracing, I start from the waistline seam and trace across the bottom of the pant. Then I mark the end of the crotch point and poke through to indicate the seam of the curved waistline. Then I line my curved ruler at the crotch point and the bottom leg point and trace the curve. I also trace the curve of the waistline. I add a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the tracing. For the waistline, I measure double the width of the elastic of my choice for the seam allowance of the waistband, which for me is 2 inches. I fold the pants in half to the back and trace the pattern the same as I did for the front. Now I have the front and back pattern for the joggers. Next, I take the cut fabric of the front and back pattern of the sweater and line them together right sides facing in. I sew down the sides with a zigzag stitch. I grab the sleeves, which are cut on opposite sides of the fabric, and fold them over right sides in, lining the sides together. I sew down the sides with a zigzag stitch. After sewing the body of the sweater and the sleeves together, I turn them all right side out. Making sure to match the longer side of the top sleeve with the back of the top of the sweater, I line and pin the side seam of the sweater and the seam of the sleeve together. Then I continue pinning together along both sides of the sleeve and sweater. I sew across with a zigzag stitch. I do the same for the other sleeve. Here's the sweater and sleeves attached. Next, I'll add the neckband, sleeve band, and the waistband. The length of the neckband is 1 inch shorter than the length around the neckline at 2.5 inches wide. The length of the armbands on the fold is a ½ inch shorter than the length of the opening of the sleeve at 3 inches wide. On the fold of the waistband, the length measures a ½ inch shorter than the bottom of the sweater at 3 inches wide. I fold all 4 bands in half right side in and sew the sides together with a zigzag stitch. Here are all the bands sewn, and I'll start with the neckband first. I take the neckband, fold and pin the seams in half onto each other, and continue folding all the way around. I measure the neckband and pin a ½ inch in on the other side. I take those 2 pins and fold them in half on the shorter side and pin at the center point. Then I pin at the center point on the longer side. I pin at the center point at the top of the sleeves and the front and back necklines of the sweater. I pin these 4 points with the 4 points of the neckband, pulling the neckline of the sweater through the neckband. I make sure to line the shorter side of the neckline with the back neckline of the sweater and the longer side with the front neckline. I stretch to fit each section as I sew around with a zigzag stitch. For the wristbands, I fold it in half, pinning the seams together, and I also pin on the other side at the half point. I pin at the half point of the sleeve on the other side of the seam. I pull the sleeve through the wristband and line and pin the seam of the sleeve and the wristband together, then pin the other 2 points together on the other side. I stretch to fit as I sew around with a zigzag stitch. Lastly, I take the waistband and again fold it in half, pinning the seams together. I pin at the other side of the half point and the center point of the front and the back of the waistband and the bottom of the sweater as well. I pin all 4 points at the bottom of the sweater and the waistband together. Again, I stretch to fit each section as I sew around with a zigzag stitch. Here's a sweater with the bands attached to the neckline, sleeves, and at the bottom of the sweater. Moving on to the pants, I take the front and back pieces and line them together, front facing in, then I sew down the sides and across the inner pant with a zigzag stitch. After sewing that together, I turn the pants right side out. I used the original pants to measure the length of the waistband, which for me was 8 inches. I take the elastic, fold over once, then measure and cut at 9 inches. I overlap the ends of the elastic a ½ inch and sew together with a zigzag stitch. Next, I fold the waistband in half and mark at both ends. I fold in half the opposite way and mark at those 2 ends. Then I pin at the center point of the waistline at the front and back. I line and pin the 4 points of the elastic waistband and the waistline together on the inside of the pant. I stretch to fit each section as I sew around with a zigzag stitch. After attaching the waistband, I fold over once, then pin at both side seams and the center point of the front and the back. Again, I stretch to fit each section as I sew around with a zigzag stitch at the edge of the bottom of the waistband. Here's the waistband fully attached. Next, I fold the waistband in half and pin at the front center point. I measure a 1/2 inch from the pin on one side and cut a small slit. I do the same on the other side. I have some drawstring here that's about a 1/2 inch wide. I take a safety pin and pin on one end of the drawstring. I insert the pin and the drawstring through one slit, then I push and pull through until I get to the other opening of the slit on the other side. I distribute the drawstring evenly around the waistband and remove the safety pin. I cut the drawstring evenly at my desired length, tie knots at both ends, and that will complete the waistband. Next, I'll attach the leg bands that measure at 5 inches in length and 4 inches wide. I prepare and attach the leg bands the same as I did for the wristbands on the sleeves. Here are the leg bands after being attached. After that's done, the jogger sweater set is now complete. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.